Hey there, Bio. This is Mrs. Cozen, and this is Unit 4 Ecology in your second semester of biology, and this is going to be Chapter 4 Ecosystems and Communities. We're going to skip through some climate stuff, okay, because we are not going to have that here. You guys are going to see that in Earth Science if you haven't already, okay? We're going to start with the words biotic and abiotic, okay? So take a look at this picture right here. What's the difference between these factors and these factors? Okay. Now we know they all come together to make one ecosystem, but just looking at the general theme in each of these pictures, biotic factors are living factors in an ecosystem, and abiotic are the non-living, okay? Think about the prefix bio means life, biotic factors, living factors. Abiotic, the prefix a means no or not or non, so non-living factors, okay? You can't get a working ecosystem without both parts, okay? And here's your definitions for both. Biotic, living influences on organisms in an ecosystem, so the actual organisms themselves, including plants and animals and bacteria, insects, fish, reptiles, anything that's living in an ecosystem. Okay, you don't have to write down all those examples, but I put down a few. And then abiotic, non-living. Think anything that contributes to the weather or climate in an area. Think sun, water, the soil, the rocks, the sand, the wind, any kind of extreme weather that you have. Those are all abiotic factors, okay? They are non-living factors. Biotic and abiotic factors determine the survival or growth of organisms and the productivity of an ecosystem. So putting those two things together determine how an ecosystem lives. We can't have a productive ecosystem without some kind of rain. We can't have plants growing and photosynthesis working for our food webs without sun. So they work together. We have to have both of them. Okay, other terms. Habitat is the area that an organism lives in. That's like its address. Niche, or you might hear it called niche. I always say niche. The way in which an organism lives in an ecosystem. And it's also dependent on where it lives. Okay, so think of habitat as its address, and the niche is its job. Okay, niche also includes habitat though, because where you work is usually pretty dependent on where you live. Okay, example, a frog. Its habitat is a pond, and its niche is eating bugs in that pond. Okay, so the niche depends on the habitat. Now here's a picture that shows really similar habitat but different niches. Okay, we have 3 species of they're warblers, and they're all pretty closely related. At one point in time, they probably had a common ancestor. Remember back to evolution, and they're all living in the same tree. But the thing is, even though they have really similar habitats, they have different niches, okay? So this warbler lives at the top of the tree, probably feeds off of seeds and leaves from the top. This warbler lives in the center, then this warbler lives at the bottom. So all 3 of them can share a really similar habitat because they have different niches or different jobs. Think of it like in the school. I teach science. I don't teach math. That's my particular niche. Okay, if everybody in the school taught math, that'd be not boring, but we would just learn math all day long, every single day. So everybody has their own niche in the school. Students have their own niche. The lunch ladies, the administrators, everybody has their own job in our ecosystem. Okay. Now let's talk about how do things interact within our ecosystem. Okay, they can have a huge effect on the living things. First thing to talk about is resources. It means any necessity of life, water, oxygen, food, anything that we need. Now, how we interact depends on how we use resources. Okay, so let's talk about how living things use resources in relation to the other living things in their habitat. Okay, first one's competition. When organisms are trying to use the same resource in the same place at the same time. Okay, so if we have 2 types or species of frogs eating the same bugs in the same pond at the same time, they are in competition with each other. Okay, So one species or even one organism is likely to win out over another. Okay, we're constantly competing for resources, constantly. Humans, not as much, but in the wild, think of it like survival of the fittest. Whoever has the most fit traits is the one who's going to win this competition. Okay, natural selection. Now, first one, I'm sure you guys have seen this word before, predation, where one organism captures and eats another one. Example, an alligator eating a bird. Okay, so we have predator and then we have prey. I know you guys have probably heard those words, just reviewing them. Okay, the word or verb for that is predation. Now, outside of predation, we have another thing called symbiosis, where we have two species living closely together. Sometimes it's beneficial, sometimes it's harmful. Okay, symbiosis just means they live together. And there are three types. They're called mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Okay, I'm sure you guys have heard parasitism or at least parasite before. So let's talk about what these three mean. Okay, mutualism is where both species benefit. There's a mutual benefit. They both get something out of the relationship. Okay, example would be bees and flowers. Honeybees get pollen from the flowers, and the flowers get to spread their pollen around when the bee flies away. So both benefit from this interaction. Okay, commensalism, where one species benefits and the other one doesn't really notice it. Okay, the other one's not really harmed or helped very much. Example would be barnacles. If you guys have ever seen on the side of like a humpback whale, they'll have these big gray sort of splotches. The humpback whale isn't really harmed by them, and the barnacles get to be carried around and breed and eat while they're on the side of the killer whale. Okay, killer whale doesn't really, I mean, not killer whale, I'm sorry, humpback whale doesn't really get anything out of it, but the barnacle does. Okay, so mutualism, both benefit. Commensalism, one benefits, the other one's not hurt. And then our favorite, of course, parasitism. One species gets helped and the other one is definitely hurt. Think fleas, ticks, any kind of intestinal worm, okay? You guys have probably heard of tapeworms. Maybe you've seen your dog or cat have tapeworms before. They look like little teeny tiny bits of rice. The animal, the parasite is helped, but the host is not helped. They are usually harmed by it, okay? So those are parasites, parasitism. So these are the verbs, parasitism, commensalism, mutualism. And those are all examples of symbiosis. Okay. Now, let's talk about when we have a huge disturbance in an ecosystem. These are things that can affect all living things, including parasites, things living under commensalism, biotic, abiotic factors, everything. Okay, it's called succession. So ecosystems are always changing. Here's something you really need to know. They're always changing even if we can't see it right now. Sometimes they'll change slowly, sometimes they'll change very quickly. And we have both human and natural causes for those. Examples would be forest fires, which could be human, caused by humans or naturally caused. Volcanoes, hurricanes, clearing land for farms, clearing land for parking lots, new buildings. Those are all examples of ways that you can change an ecosystem. Okay. Just some examples of human ways that we change ecosystems really fast. Clear cutting or logging, urbanization, where we're clearing large pieces of land for building, deforestation, very similar to logging, and air pollution. Those are ways that humans can cause really big disturbances really fast in an ecosystem. Natural disturbances would be weather. Okay, think our terrible winter we just had, blizzards, droughts, wind, hurricanes, tornadoes, okay, forest fires that are naturally caused. Any of those things are natural disturbances that can change an ecosystem fast. And we call that ecological succession, okay? Series of predictable changes that occur over time in a community. Remember, community means all the living things in an area, okay? All the living things in one area. So ecological succession is constantly happening. If you guys look out your front door, you can probably see it happening right now. You can see little pieces of grass maybe growing between pieces of sidewalk, or ivy growing up the side of your house. Any of those are examples of succession. And there are two types, primary and secondary. Okay, Primary is really slow, takes a long time, and it occurs where there's no soil. So after a volcano erupts, or think when a parking lot is laid down, there is no soil. So the first thing that has to happen is usually plants, animals, other living things have to come in and actually break that up in order to create soil before we can grow in it. So primary succession takes a very long time. Okay. The first thing that usually grows in an area, it's called a pioneer species. And the first one that usually grows is moss, or another word for it is lichens. If you guys look outside on your sidewalk now, you can probably see little bits of moss, or moss grows up the side of trees. Those are the first species to grow because they don't need big root systems. They just need very small root systems. So that's what we call first species, pioneer species. Okay. The second type of succession is called secondary succession. So this is where we already have soil. This one goes much faster than primary. It can still take a long time, but in comparison to primary, we've already got the soil. We can just get some plants in there and grow. Examples would be after a forest fire, we still have soil. We can plant new trees. Clearing land, we still have soil. We can plant. We can put new plants in, new animals. Okay, here's an example of succession, you guys. This is secondary succession. We already have soil. And it's pretty predictable. If you have, where an area is clear cut, especially around here, this is a pretty good picture representing what it would look like here in Michigan. You're going to have small little plants growing first. Then you're going to get small shrubs, larger shrubs. You're going to get small trees, and then larger trees. We call this, when it's reached maturity, it's called a climax community. Climax community. Now that means that it doesn't mean that it's not changing. It just means it's really reached its oldest vegetation. Okay, it's called a climax community. It could still change, but okay. So think about these questions, you guys. Which one takes longer and why? How are they the same? How are they different? Okay, I would like for you guys to answer these questions at the end of your notes, please. And I think that's it for us. Yep, if you guys can just make sure that you answer these questions at the end of your notes, you are done with chapter 4. Good job.